Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Joe. I lead consulting at the Understanding Group, and at the core of our practice is making models. Models to make the complex clear, models as an expression of information architecture. And so, since today is all about context, I want to share a technique that I've found really helpful for dealing with a situation that I think maybe all of us who are listening today likely find ourselves in more and more. A situation where we need to consider more things and contextualize more and more and more and more as we make sense of these ever increasingly connected ecosystems of information. And so today I'm going to be talking through three movements. Purpose behind this technique, why even bother? Uh, Walking through that technique, outlining what it is, showing how simple and helpful it is. And then third, a case study around how I've used it recently. So uh, here's kind of where I'm coming from. Uh, I don't think ever before we've had more means or opportunities to overwhelm ourselves. We find ourselves in a world that has increasingly few clear, defined boundaries. It's not uncommon for folks in our line of work to happily and honestly reflect on the interconnected nature of everything over a morning cup of tea. It's just par for the course. We have pervasive information. We've got tools that offer us infinite canvases, meta contexts, remote work, seamless integrations. Uh, but we are finite humans. Uh, we've got increased means to make more things and more complicated things, the ability for anybody to make incredibly powerful software in a short amount of time with more connections than ever. Tools that are sold to us that include features listed using words like unlimited and infinite. I'm not saying those are inherently bad. It's just that our technology seems to be rapidly outpacing our physiology. Uh, and I wonder if maybe that's where a lot of the excitement about AI comes from. Uh, this promise that maybe something can help us deal with this sense of overwhelm and help us understand what is this world that we found ourselves in and what's going on and how we manage it all. Before we've been limited by our ability to make things happen technically. But today, the limitations don't seem to be as much technical. It's based on our ability to imagine things and coordinate and communicate to ensure that we're not just making something, but that we're making the right thing. And we find ourselves in this situation, maybe you've been in this room, where people are saying they agree, but when you actually are able to, uh, not that you can look into people's heads, but when the thing gets made, you find out, no, we're not in agreement. But that's where models come into play, right? I'm sure we've all have some experience with modeling or diagrams. We can use those terms interchangeably today. Um, we know that there's a power in pictures. They help us communicate ideas. They help us uh, collaborate and coordinate by making something that's invisible and making it visible, right? Whereas we had something in our heads before, we can get it out, we can talk about it, we can work with it, and then we can actually develop a shared understanding. And as I mentioned, I work with models a lot, and I've spent much time talking about them and thinking about them. But I don't want to take that for granted that you all have the same perspective and context for what goes into models like I have. But this technique is really all about and built on some core principles of models. So I just want to quickly level set and share those with you now. So first, we can model anything that we can think of. And we can model anything about anything that we can think of, but we cannot model everything about everything. Choices need to be made about what we're going to do. We could, if we had the time, we could uh, make more models of things than we ought to, more models than would be helpful. So we need to choose. Second, the way that you ensure the thing that you're making is going to turn out like you hope is to figure out what you want to make before figuring out how you're going to make it. That's a principle that the understanding group is founded on of what before how. And three, when we're talking about models, we're talking about things that are for play. Play is in like what you do with Play-Doh. You work with it, you shape it, you see what happens when it's in your hands, you get it out of your head. Uh, or maybe play is in role play. You pretend to see what something is like in a safe environment before you try it out for real or commit to it. And so on the left here is what's called the model approach placard, and it's just a very simple tool to help you establish and maintain your modeling focus amidst a cacophony of what are very likely good options. In addition to using this technique myself, I've taught it to many students in workshops, and it's always interesting hearing what others say about the thing that I've taught them and how they use it. Um, and I think they probably do a much better job of describing the value of it than I can. So they say it allows you to actually use diagrams for as a tool for designing and collaborating instead of having something that should be communicating, but it's not actually communicating. The sense-making tool that doesn't actually make sense. It's more overwhelming than it is helpful. It offers a vocabulary for talking about planning and using the models, both on your own and with others. And it allows you to be intentional about what you're making so you can iterate faster. We know that software might take months and months to make, and so we make a model to figure out in a day or two, is that the thing? Do we want to take months and months to do that, or should we figure it out first? Similarly, this model approach will only take you 10 minutes and help you figure out, okay, what is it that I actually want to spend the time to model in service of the end goal there. And so that's really why I find this technique helpful is it helps me manage the many potential fractal paths that I could go on as a person trying to make sense of the world. So let's dive into this technique. I've made it available as a template on the Miroverse if you are a Miro user. But as you'll see in a second, it is not, doesn't need to be a template. It's 5 questions. Um, and, and so if you were to look at that template and kind of what we'll walk through today is on the left, there is the template with the 5 questions that are described, and then 2 sets of examples. One is for how I might use a model to help me plan a dinner party, because that's not a thing that I do very much, and I need as much help as I can get. And the second one is an example of how a model, for a model that would be used along a website redesign process. And so there'll be a link at the end to get this template if you want to have those examples. Otherwise, 5 questions that you can just write down, maybe even remember on your hand. And so these 5 questions are really an invitation for you to think about what is the concept that's going to frame what your model needs to do. We're going to walk through these 5 simple questions. And as we go through the 5 questions, we'll key in on the 2 examples to kind of round out and paint that picture. So first, the intent. Why do you think you need to make a model right now? What is the challenge that you're facing? What are you relying on this model to help you achieve? If you don't know what you're trying to do, you're not going to be able to do it. It's as simple as that. There's many clever ways to say that, but good luck. So, um, for the dinner party example, I want to host this dinner party. That's my end goal. There's a whole bunch of stuff I need to figure out about that. Um, one small portion of that is I need to figure out where I'm going to seat these people. I want to bring together multiple friend groups, and I want to seat them in such a way where there's an opportunity for people to get to know each other and have something in common with. And so for this model, my intent is I need to figure out who already knows each other and what common interests there might be. That's it. It's a very specific subset of all the possible things that I could focus on. And so the intent doesn't have to be perfect. It can change, it can evolve over time, but by stating it, we have a guiding light that helps us not get distracted by all the other things that we could focus on. Second question, who's our audience? Who's the model being created for? Who needs to understand it in the end? It can be just for us. I always start whenever I make uh, a model to try and clarify a concept. If I can't make it make sense for me, I have no ability to make it make sense for somebody else. So maybe it's for us. Maybe eventually it will turn into something we make for somebody else. Shifting over to our dinner party example, I am the sole host of this imaginary dinner party in my mind. I need to figure this out for myself. Eventually, I'll communicate to my friends where they need to sit, maybe have some conversation starters. But for right now, I'm the only one who's ever going to see this model that helps me behind the scenes figure out what's going on. And that is going to help me not put too much into it because it's just for me. I don't need to make it work for anybody else. In our website redesign example, I already have established what the needs are, but the point of this model is to reflect those back to the stakeholders so that they can see themselves in this and have confidence in this process. So this model isn't just for me. I will have to figure it out and should have figured it out ahead of time. But now this particular model needs to be clear and make sense to those stakeholders, the audience, somebody else. Third, what are the aspects that you're going to pay attention to in this model? So I mentioned before that we can model anything about anything, but we can't model, and we shouldn't even try to model everything about even one thing. There's too many ways to approach it. And so you need to figure out of all the things I could potentially try to describe about the territory that I am modeling, which ones do I really need to focus on right now? Which ones do I get to give myself permission to ignore? And can we write them down and rely on it to say, okay, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm not doing. I'm not saying these don't exist. I'm just saying the focus is on a subset. You could think of these as aspects or dimensions or what are the factors at play. Like to think of it like talking about a human being. What about a human being? Are we talking about personality? of a human being? Are we talking about uh, the physicality of a human being? Even within, the physicality, are we talking about the skeletal system, the muscular system, right? The nervous system? Like there are so many different ways you can slice and dice any particular thing. Uh, Figuring out what is important, what do I need to focus on? How do I need to tune my awareness to pay attention to the stuff that's going to help me deliver on that intent that I stated up front? So in this imaginary dinner party example, uh, as I mentioned, there's a whole lot of things that eventually I'll have to consider for this party. I can clearly see what is in and what is out based on what I need to communicate. For the stakeholder needs model, uh, there's a whole lot of stuff that many of the people involved in redesigning a website really care about. But right now, there's only a very thin slice of things that needs to be communicated through this model. I need to communicate the stakeholder needs, what their desires are, and any themes that those kind of cluster up into, which means I get to ignore anything about technology, content, user needs, interface, and the myriad other things that uh, come up when talking about websites. And I love being able to ignore stuff and have permission structures uh, that let me focus my attention and my awareness, do a good job on the task at hand. Number 4, state. If aspects is maybe the hardest question to answer because uh, how can you possibly conceive of all the possible things? State is maybe the easiest one. Are we talking about uh, things the way they are right now or things how you want them to be in the future? It's a really simple distinction to be made, but it causes, when that distinction is not made, it causes a whole lot of confusion. So I've never had a dinner party before like this, and so I'm talking about one that is in the future. After my first dinner party, maybe I'll do a current state version that says, okay, how was it last time? And I can contrast that for next time. But right now, we're just talking about a future state thing that has never happened before. Same with the stakeholder needs model. We're talking about a redesigned website, the future state. What do these stakeholders want in the future? Like I said, easiest one. Last, the level of abstraction. Uh, every model is some amount of abstraction from the actual thing. Right? As Andrew had that quote up there, the map is not the territory. It is an abstraction of the territory that is helpful for facilitating different kinds of discussions. And different levels of abstraction help uh, focus conversations in different kinds of way. So the more detail that you include, the more the attention is going to go towards the detail. I've never been in a room where there is detail, relevant or not, that did not get the attention of the people around. There's something about human beings that when there's detail, the attention goes there. And so this is not an objective scale where we can quantify where along this continuum the abstraction is. This is a helpful statement of intent for what you as the modeler want to do and what are the kinds of conversations you want to have. And so a rule that or an exercise that I go through is um, starting in the middle, thinking, okay, can I imagine a less detailed, more abstract way of representing this? If I can't, then maybe I'm all the way over. What I actually want to do is the highest level of abstraction. Can I imagine a more detailed version? Yes, no, wherever you are, use that as a way to plot this along here. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a thing to help you keep in mind what your intent is and make decisions accordingly. So for our dinner party example, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'm not making a comprehensive or super detailed representation of all my friends' interests. I just want enough detail to rationalize the seating chart. So I can imagine so many ways to include many more details, but I don't think that's going to be helpful for the conversation that I will need to have with myself using this model to make some decisions. It's going to be pretty abstract. Uh, for the stakeholder website example, I can imagine a way of expressing stakeholder needs with a whole lot more detail. I can also imagine a way of expressing them with much less detail. But based on the level of validation and buy-in that I want from this group of people, really striking the balance in the middle will help me have the right kinds of conversations. The stakeholders need to be able to see enough of what they told me in here to feel good about where we're going. But this can't get lost. These are high-level conversations about directionality. So we don't want to be too detailed. So 5 questions. Uh, Not very complicated questions, but they are really helpful in establishing and maintaining clarity about what it is that you're trying to make clear in this model, in any model that you make, so that you can put good and spacious boundaries around what you are and what you are not focusing on right now, whatever it may be. This QR code will take you to that Miroverse link if you want to grab the Miro version of this. But like I said, 5 questions, 5 words will help a lot. So lastly, I want to walk through a case study of how I've actually used this recently. I'll admit that I don't always go through and use these questions, but it really helps when I'm stuck or I don't know what to do, or I find myself wandering, not staying on track. And so that happened not too long ago. I was trying to make sense of an unruly and rapidly expanding set of ideas and possibilities for this new AI-focused product that we were working on. And so I leaned on this technique. The situation was like many of us, we found ourselves trying to figure out how we'd respond to this impending AI boom that's going to change everything. And we pulled together a really great team of partners and started dreaming up what we might offer. We thought of a whole lot of things. This Miro board is zoomed out to 2% right now, and it doesn't quite fit everything on there. We had lots of ideas and lots of versions from lots of people. And so the challenge was, how do we align this team of 7 people from across different disciplines, using different terminology, coming from different companies, around a singular vision of what we could go to market with? And so as the one leading this development effort, I set out to, I needed to propose something that would bring together the months of effort from a number of people. I knew it didn't need to be right per se. It just needed to be clear enough where the folks that I was working with could see where the gaps and the errors were, and that together we could fix them. While that giant Miro board allowed everybody to develop their thoughts adjacent to one another, as a whole, the board wasn't really communicating anything clearly to anybody. We did not have a shared understanding. And so I wrote out what I wanted to do. I wanted to map out all the pieces of this AI readiness offering that we had to date, their intended sequence in a project so that all the collaborators could see if it made sense or if we needed to include pieces we'd missed. That was the challenge that I needed this model to help me solve. Who is it for? What's the audience? It was for anybody who is working on a part of the offering, wanting to know how the pieces should connect, or anybody responsible for delivering it eventually so they could know how all the things worked together. I wanted to include pieces of the offering, the activities and artifacts that we had imagined, how we were chunking up different stages and phases of activities, any of the relationships, the sequential relationships between parts of this thing. And because a lot of this was new, there were some underlying concepts that we were working on developing alongside of the activities and the deliverables. But because of the way the conversations were going, it was important to me to not include outcomes and not include the phases or the status of how done these pieces were, because that tended to be something that derailed us and took a lot of the attention from the conversation. And so I intentionally wanted to leave those out, keep us from getting distracted. This was a future state thing, and it necessarily needed to be pretty abstract. We didn't have all the details yet to really dive in and detail everything out. That will come later. And so I made this model. And when you think about aspects and what is in and what is out, looking at this, the yellow and the blue highlight pieces of the offering that I wanted to include. These dotted lines and labels in blue and green show the stages and the steps that needed to be in there. How were we organizing the work? The lines show the relationships, and the red down here at the bottom shows the underlying concepts and how they connect with the pieces of the offering. And you'll note that there is nothing on here about how done any of these pieces are, or marketing sales copy around what the value is of any of these pieces. So everything stayed on target, and when I started to deviate, I could use the set of aspects and everything that's on that model approach placard to bring things back on target. So as a result, we were able to bring together many of the great ideas into a cohesive whole, coordinate our efforts and intentions, and be able to have a product that we could start to market and sell. And so we have an AI consulting product that's designed to help organizations with complicated information-based workflows optimize their efforts in an ethical way around enabling human thriving. And that's pretty great. So I've talked through a lot of things, and I want to kind of weave it all back together as I wrap up here. We've never been more able to overwhelm ourselves with good things. And models play an important role in helping us be able to make sense of all the things that we find ourselves encountering. But without intentionality, these tools that are supposed to help us will end up, and have been, overwhelming us. And so this model approach placard, this map technique, offers a good framework. It's not perfect. It's not the only way to go about it, but it's a helpful way of being intentional about the models that we create. And since models are for play, they don't need to be right or perfect. They just need to encourage collaboration and alignment. And by focusing our models, that allows us to use them quicker. It allows us to see if they're actually helpful and keep moving, whether that's great, take what we learned from that model and build on it, or realize that that was based on a hypothesis that didn't pan out and we're going to discard it and try again. Either way, we keep moving and fight against being overwhelmed. To learn more about this technique, you can sign up for a 4-week workshop that Travis LaFleur and I teach at the Understanding Group around this method and techniques for creating effective models that help us communicate and understand for ourselves and others. The next one begins mid-April. And I think that's what I got.
All right, very good. Thank you, Joe. An invaluable service if ever I did see one. And good to know that you're for hire. Even if people find your Miro placard and work through it to some point and get stuck, the understanding group is there to support their next modeling project.